You are now watching On Point, a news and public affairs show from California State University, Northridge.
Good afternoon and welcome to On Point. I'm Efrain Ballon, and in today's show, we shift our focus to the future of journalism, pondering whether it's a bright path or a challenging road. Recent events have stirred the media landscape, with hundreds of LA Times workers facing unexpected layoffs. That means 20% of the newsroom was laid off, making it the largest workforce reduction in the history of the paper. We'll delve into the implications and the outlook for journalism with three insightful guests. We have Jeremy Childs. He was a reporter at the LA Times and the Ventura County Star. Haley Sawyer. She is a professor at COC at CSUN part-time and also a sports journalist. Very busy life. And Julia Toms. She is a senior at CSUN and also a journalism student. Welcome, guys. Thank you for coming. Let's get to know you guys a little bit. Jeremy, what inspired you to be a journalist?
Thank you for that question. Thank you for having me. I kind of fell into journalism. I was an English and creative writing major at Occidental College. I didn't really know what I wanted to do when I graduated, and eventually I decided I wanted to be a writer of some sort. There was an opening for a weekend reporter position at my hometown paper, the Ventura County Star, so I ended up moving back home with my parents and working there part-time, and that's how I kind of broke into the industry. I've been working now for about 8 years as a professional reporter.
We're fellow students from Oxnard. I went to Oxnard myself.
Nice.
Haley, what inspired you to be a journalist?
I wanted to go to art school coming out of high school, but my mom said no. So she was like, let's look at some other things that you're kind of good at. And I was always really into creative writing. I was kind of always like the English student. Like that was my thing throughout high school and even before that. So she's like, how about journalism? And I was like, yeah, like that sounds good. Let's just try that. So I went to college for that. I went to Robert Morris University in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Started as an entertainment reporter at my college paper, then I transitioned to sports, partly because the paper had a really great sports editor that I learned so much from. And also I just had an interest in sports. I think it's really interesting. I was a cheerleader in high school. I never actually played a sport, but I was always around them and my family was into sports. So I always liked watching them, and I thought the many layers to sports was really interesting and how it influences our everyday lives. It influences entertainment, arts, culture, everything like that. So I think the many different facets of sports journalism kind of attracted me to that genre particularly.
Wow, that is very interesting. Julia, what inspired you to become a journalist?
I think, like my fellow panelists, I was drawn from an early age to English and to writing and reading. And so when I got into high school and I was starting to think about what I wanted to do with my life, it kind of seemed like a natural path for me to follow, to do something creative, something writing-based. So I wanted to originally major in English only, and my parents kind of understandably were very hesitant to let me do that. So I started to look into other options that could kind of make my career more successful, to make me more marketable. And journalism kind of seemed to be a pretty good option, solid option to help me get into different paths. So that's how it started out.
Thank you. That's very nice. As we can tell, we're full of creative writing majors. I was actually a creative writer myself.
Nice. When
I started school. And then the Navy sort of told me, you shouldn't follow that. You should follow journalism. So we were talking a little bit about you, Jeremy, with the LA Times, and you were working there.
Yeah. And
were you affected by the layoffs?
I was among the dozens of people laid off about a month ago. I had only started working there in May of last year, so I'd been there for about 8 months. There was a round of layoffs after I'd started in June of that year. They didn't lay off any reporters, but there were other departments such as photographers, copy editors, et cetera, that were affected. This time around, though, we were told it was going to be the big one and that all departments would be affected by it, including news.
And I remember that the LA Times had a walkout
Yes.
Before they did the firing. Were you part of it?
Yeah, I participated in the walkout. So the LA Times is a unionized newsroom. They unionized in, I believe, 2018 and got a contract in 2019. The action by the union to stage a one-day walkout was to protest the way in which the management of the LA Times was going about the layoffs. It was being dodgy about the number of people laid off, which departments. They were refusing to negotiate with the bargaining committee of the union. And so in response to the kind of way they were being treated, the union staged the 24-hour walkout, which was unprecedented in the history of the newspaper.
Wow. And how did that impact your life exactly when that happened?
I mean, it was invigorating to experience the solidarity with my colleagues. It, didn't change what ultimately happened. The layoff still occurred, but it did send a message, I believe, to management and to LA and the greater media ecosystem that we weren't going to go down without a fight.
And I think you already kind of touched on that, but I wanted to ask you a little bit more.
Sure.
What did the union say when all of this was happening before the layoffs and during the walkout? What were they telling you?
So we had been in, they communicate with us fairly regularly after meeting with management, and they were frustrated with the way things were going out. That it was not what was desired. We really wanted a way to save jobs during the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020 during the lockdowns. The Guild implemented a work share kind of reduced hours functionality to save people's jobs. So people got paid less, but as a result, the money that was saved was able to avert layoffs. This time around with the layoffs, the Guild wanted buyouts for older employees, more experienced employees who often make more money to save kind of newer hires, such as myself at the paper.
And Haley, what do you think, or what do you feel about what was happening at the LA Times and in the industry in general lately?
It sucks. It's really hard to see, and it was hard. It was kind of weird for me because I was hired full-time in late August. So what I was experiencing...
Was it late August last year or?
Of this year, like this August.
Okay.
Yeah, so I was experiencing invigoration in the opposite way, and I was just hired full-time after freelancing for 2 years, and it's so exciting, I'm part of a newsroom again, but then you see everything happening and it's like, oh my gosh, I need to reevaluate what it takes to be full-time now, and I need to be mentally ready for a layoff that might come. I have been laid off once in my career already at the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, which I also, kind of saw coming and I was mentally braced for. So it's an interesting time because everybody's vulnerable. Like he said, people who have been around for a long time have gotten laid off. You've been working there for a year and you got laid off. So it just makes you reevaluate what your role is in the industry and what you can help do to perpetuate it.
Yeah, that is very sad what was happening. Julia, what do you think about what you just heard from two experienced journalists?
I would say it's certainly concerning. I think I can speak for all journalism students when we say it's a little bit of a frightening time, and we're all a little bit uncertain about how it's going to progress and move forward. It's always been a very competitive career, and now even more than ever. So it's just, it's definitely making us all think about, what comes next and how we're going to face the challenges ahead of us.
Given the current media consumption habits that we have with this generation, what do you think are the biggest challenges of journalists today?
I think one of the big challenges is meeting audiences where they receive their news. Newspapers are a very dated medium. You know, the older generations, boomers, etc., grew up with newspapers and are very much in the habit of reading them. But for younger generations, millennials, Gen Z, etc., they consume their media in a variety of mediums, you know. And so it's important to reach those audiences where they spend their time.
Right. Actually, I'm gonna take what you just said, and on the next segment, we will observe and discuss some more insightful information that our reporter Leah gained while out in the field.
I tell my son, I love you every single day.
Hi, and welcome back to On Point. We're here with 3 other journalists, and the theme today is the future of journalism. Our reporter Leah went out in the field and gained some valuable insight into how news is consumed in a world that is technologically changing.
I get my news either from social media like Instagram, or sometimes early in the morning before school, like Channel 7 News or something like that.
I mostly see my news in TikTok, but I also see my news on the TV because my parents would listen to it every single morning.
The sites that I like to read are usually like the Guardian. Like I like to read some general news. Like I'll check out like Wall Street, and I like to look at finance stuff. But I like to watch like YouTube commentators, like political commentators, because they make it pretty entertaining nowadays.
Well, from one side, from a friend who's always getting news from the computer and he informs me. And if not, then obviously from YouTube and social media, but barely from regular TV news.
Like I be getting my information out of like rap on Instagram. I know that it's completely not. A lot of it is so inaccurate. So I think if I want to really believe something, I search it up. But even then, I feel like that's kind of hard to believe.
So Julia, how do you consume your news?
A lot like the people that we just saw on social media, on Instagram, on TikTok. But also as a journalist, I have a little bit of a responsibility to be informed. So I also, on my commute to morning, I will listen to NPR, or I also subscribe to a couple of news outlets like New York Times, Wall Street Journal, that sort of thing. So I get emails every day about, current events.
I do almost the same.
Yeah.
I follow social media, and I also follow, some publications here and there. Haley, how do you consume news?
I also get mine a lot from social media, probably Instagram and X. I'm one of the few users of X that's left, I guess, formerly Twitter. But I'm also like a big Googler. Like if I hear of something like my friends are talking about or my family's talking about, like maybe that's the journalist in me, I immediately go to Google and like seek out my own information so that I can seek out reliable sources of news and like check the credibility of things. So yeah, I would say I'm a old school kind of news consumer in that sense.
And Jeremy, same question.
Yeah, I mostly consume news on my phone or my laptop. I also use X or Twitter. I have been on there for a long time, and so it's kind of an old habit at this point. I subscribe to several news outlets as well, like New York Times, LA Times, and I get emails with some of their top stories. Sometimes I visit their homepages to see what stories are trending on each website. So it's a variety of places.
And since you guys are the most seasoned journalists out of this panel and watching this package, are you afraid of the future of the newsrooms with this new technology coming in?
In what regard? Can you expand on that a little?
In the regards of, in the old times, people used to read or get the news from a newspaper, and it was the print section. But now that seems to have been a little outdated, and people are moving into new technologies. Do you think that the industry is going to be hurt by that? Let's start with you, Haley.
I don't think so. I think I'm like a very optimistic person, like hopelessly optimistic, which is probably why I'm still working in this industry.
Why do you say that? What makes you say that?
I think I see a lot of people leaving journalism. A lot of colleagues are leaving journalism.
But you're still hopeful.
Yeah, I am. I am. I know I'm diverting a little bit, and I actually forget what the original question was.
Well, are you a little afraid of the future of newsrooms?
I think when you mention like the print section vanishing, I still have people reach out to me and ask if they can have print editions of stories that they were featured in, or a photo was in, or they know someone was in it. And it's kind of unfortunate that we stopped providing individual copies during the pandemic. So people like curiously still have an interest in the print edition. But it's just, it's always evolving. Like, people are always getting their news in different ways. And at SoCal News Group papers, at the Daily News where I work, we have resources and apps and plugins that show us where people are visiting the site from, whether they're coming from social media, from X, from Instagram, from Google, Yahoo, like DuckDuckGo, like you name it.
Sorry, I just wanted to hear what Jeremy had to say also.
Sure.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. I do think it's changing, and I do think more traditional legacy media has a challenge, especially with the business model. It was very easy for people to pay for news when they had a physical, tangible item, the newspaper, the magazine. Online, people are much less willing to pay for news. There are outlets that also don't cost any money. They run off of digital ads. And so the reluctancy for audiences to pay for news makes it challenging for news providers to fund their operations. That's the kind of fundamental challenge.
And looking a little bit into the future and technology, how do you think technology has impacted the field? And do you think AI will make that bridge even bigger?
Yeah, it definitely is. I think the tech companies like Facebook and Google especially have really consumed a lot of the ad market for online advertising, and so they take most of the revenue, and the news organizations are kind of fighting for scraps. And they're also using AI programs like Copilot on Bing or Google Gemini. There's these AI programs that are kind of auto-populating people's search, ideas, what they're looking for, and people are going to websites less as a result,
Right. When we return, we have some questions for our guests to understand their perspective on journalism and where the future is heading.
If you smoked, this new lung cancer screening could save your life. Visit SaveByTheScan.org.
Hello and welcome back to On Point. Following an exploration of what lies ahead for journalists, we're eager to present our concluding thoughts and reflections on this matter. In the context of recent layoffs, how do you think it affects the community access to reliable information?
It's terrible. I think it impacts it by having fewer people covering, what's going on every day. There's no less news happening, but there's less people covering it. And so the result is that less things get covered, and that affects the community by them being less informed, by the reduction of resources. It's kind of this loop.
And what do you think about, recent influencers doing journalism or so-called journalism by putting things out there in their massive following that it's probably a little bigger than what it was for print back in the days?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I have two minds. On the one hand, journalism is it's something you do, it's an action, it's a skill set, and so anyone can be a journalist. At the same time, professionals are held to an editorial standard that influencers, independent journalists aren't necessarily, and so as a result, the quality of information can be reduced, or there can be misinformation, being spread. And so I think anyone who works as a journalist or presents themselves as a journalist has a responsibility to make sure they maintain, ethical standards in their reporting.
Mm-hmm. Haley, this is going to be a little bit of a different question, but how can journalists protect themselves in the age of social media, in some newsrooms' denial to change the dynamics of letting people from news, or I should rephrase that, some newsrooms' denial to change the dynamics of the newsroom, and how institutions do for profit. What do you think? How can we protect ourselves from that?
I think journalists shouldn't be afraid of change. I think a prime example is like journalists used X, formerly Twitter, for so long, and we used it to promote our work and promote our careers and make connections with other journalists and readers and people and whatnot. So when Twitter was bought out and it became X and we didn't know what was going to happen, journalists were like freaking out. But we had become so dependent on one app, and I think that was a pitfall of the industry. So you have to be ready to change and you have to be ready to pivot. I just got a TikTok like a month ago. I never thought I would have a TikTok.
Well, how come you decided to open a TikTok?
Well, if you look at the data, the amount of people who get their news from X is decreasing. Instagram is like flatlining, a little bit increasing. TikTok is the only social media app that is gradually increasing when it comes to where people get their news. So I am a data-driven person. I'm very black and white when it comes to things. So I was like, oh, like readership on TikTok is going up. I have to get a TikTok. So I talked to our social media crew, and they were like, yes, like experiment, try it out, just see what happens, because it's kind of a new territory. Because, you know, we have the influencers who are kind of doing news talk type things, but it's not really traditional journalism. So I think there's a great opportunity for journalists to step into that and present news that is, you know, accurate, transparent, ethical, fair. But the only pitfall with TikTok right now is you can't link to your website unless you have like 10,000 followers. So I have 53 right now. So
you got to start somewhere.
You got to start somewhere, and the metrics are a little complicated with TikTok. We don't know if it's best to focus on the amount of followers, the amount of views, the amount of likes. So, but to me, that's the fun part. It's just like, let's just try stuff. We have to try stuff. We don't have a choice but to try stuff right now.
Right. So Julia, with what we have heard about social media and the new ways that journalism is developing, how do you plan to integrate these emerging technologies into the new profession?
Yeah, I think like what Haley said, we have to develop and kind of evolve what we think of as journalism and what our jobs are as journalists, to fit into the kind of evolving worlds that involves AI. I don't think that we should be afraid of it. I think that it's another tool that we can use. And, you know, every generation thinks that theirs is, you know, the end of the world is nigh and, you know, everything's going to fall apart. So I'm hopeful that AI is not going to be the destruction of journalism. It's going to actually aid journalism and improve it, hopefully.
Hopefully make it evolve, right?
Yeah.
Well, we are here on Point, and we are talking about journalism. When we come back, we will give our final thoughts on how rapidly evolving technologies may affect the outlook of newsrooms and journalism.
I'm an actor in an ad reminding you that if you're high, just don't drive.
Hello and welcome back to On Point. After delving into the future of journalism in response to recent events, we would like to share our final thoughts and conclusions on this issue. So, after talking everything that we have talked today, have you guys seen the usage of AI in your respective workplaces? And has it affected you guys? Let's start with you, Jared.
Sure. So I would say in my experience, it's been very limited, although there are some applications that we use that use AI technology. One of them at the LA Times was called Data Miner. It's an app that kind of monitors social media, radio feeds, public scanners to pick up news events, and it sends alerts based on what could be big news events like fires, robberies, etc. And so it's an algorithm that uses AI to pick and choose things out of the noise. And I use that almost every day when I was a breaking news journalist.
So you don't have to sort of discern what you see coming out. The AI tells you.
Exactly. Instead of checking every Twitter page or listening to every radio scanner, it would pick and choose kind of where to focus attention.
And are you afraid of AI missing important information that you could have reported, but the AI didn't catch it?
Absolutely, and it's definitely, you can never report directly off of what the AI sends you. You have to corroborate that independently, but it's a tool to use to find news in the world.
And Haley, I remember that you were saying that you like data, and I'm guessing because of sports, there is a lot of data in sports. Have you used any AIs to sort of sort out that data so you can present it a little clearer?
I'm sure something will come to me, but when I think of AI in my job, there's a lot of like little practical uses that you wouldn't ordinarily think of. AI has helped me with transcriptions a lot. If you have the Otter app, or my Google phone comes with a recorder app that automatically transcribes conversations using AI. So now I don't have to listen to the conversation and manually type it out, which is so time consuming.
Is the Google phone the Pixel phone?
Yes.
I have the same phone, and I'm blown away by the way it works.
Yeah, AI on Pixel phones also, you can edit photos with it. You can remove like shadows or like distracting things in the background. But then it becomes an ethical conversation again, like what is okay to remove from a photo and what is okay to not.
And how can you tell if it was taken out or not?
Exactly.
What do you think about journalists having to disclose the usage of AI in their stories?
Well, transparency is one of the pillars of traditional journalism, and Sports Illustrated was recently in some hot water because of this, because I don't know if you guys are familiar, but they were using AI to generate not only stories, but also authors and for those stories, for the writers. And they didn't tell anyone that they were using AI. So when people found out, it was like an uproar because they felt lied to, basically.
And Julia, have you used AI in assignments in school, and did you have to disclose that to the professor?
Well, not to self-incriminate, but yes, I have used AI. And generally, yes, if the assignment has to do with using AI, then you obviously are disclosing that you're using AI. But yeah, I oftentimes will use it to outline an interview or to get ideas for certain questions to ask.
If you guys don't mind, what are your final thoughts about this? Let's start with you, Julie.
I try to be hopeful about the future of journalism, especially in regards to AI. I know that it's something that's with us now. It's not going to go away, so now it's just about learning how to use it.
Haley?
If you want to get into journalism, be ready to work, because you're going to be asked to do so many different things. Know how to do some video, some mobile stuff, know how to write, of course, the basics, but also the little things are so important. Like, you have to, especially if you want to get into freelance, be on top of everything. You have to email people back on time. You have to meet your deadlines. You have to come up with story pitches, do all these tiny little things right, and just work really hard at the end of the day.
And Jeremy?
It's a brave new world out there, but we'll be ready for it.
And thank you for watching. This is On Point. My name is Ballon.